You want to talk about? Why don't we talk about addictions? So something I read years ago, because obviously I see it in the comments. I get people email me, and typically addictions come from a failure to feel. You're running from something that feels unpleasant, so you take something to cover it up, or mask it, or numb it. So what was your experience? Because obviously that led to a business for you, a coaching business, I guess.
Yeah. So, and that wasn't the goal at all. The goal when I stopped drinking was to save my life. Because look, I'm fortunate that I didn't do anything irreparable or irreversible. I always say that if you get in front of your problems before society has to, then people will forgive you. At the very least, they're going to be much more open to forgive you. But if you kill somebody, well, now you can't drink because you're in jail. That doesn't count,
I got
right?
one of his dads and my high school buddies had a drinking problem. He was one of those guys who would start drinking. He would drink till he got blackout drunk, and then when he got a real good buzz on, he wanted to fight everybody.
Right.
And I want to go out and have a good time. And then we go out and we're out like an hour, and already somebody punched him in the mouth, gave him a bloody lip or whatever because he's talked shit. Somebody bumped into him, whatever. And then we got to take him home or take him to the hospital or whatever to get his lips sewn up.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And he ended up he had I can't remember, he went through rehab, I don't know how, probably 20 different times. And he ended up on I-95 running into this couple, rear-ending them because he was hammered. They wrecked, both of them died in the accident. And so the officer, because he was one of those guys, he drank so much, and like you really couldn't tell, his eyes wouldn't get all messy, he wouldn't slur his words. It's like he just seemed normal, but other than the fact that he wanted to fight people. And he would get just so the I guess the police officer, when he's interviewing him, took his wrote his driver's license down and he let him go.
Wow.
And then so when the cop goes back to the car to pull up his driver's license, pull up his record, he sees all the DUIs that were on there and the times that he had been arrested and stuff. So like I guess literally as he was pulling in the driveway, the cops were like right behind him, and then he arrested him, took him to jail. He got charged for manslaughter, and I think he got like 15, 16 years.
Wow.
And then when I was living down in South Beach, he got in touch with me, and I hadn't talked to him. I was like, "What have you been up to?" He's like, "I've been in the joint." I was like,
kidding.
"Well, I heard." And then we were all going to get together, and something happened. He ended up right back in jail.
Yep.
And he's still there. I don't. More than likely, probably he drank or whatever. He was in there like 10, 12 years, I think it was. Came right out and went right back to the same shit.
Because look, man, this has been my experience. I cannot speak for everyone. This is for me personally and a lot of the people I've observed, but I know other things lead to it. Whatever your reason is for using a substance, that is almost always to alleviate a social pressure. Whether that pressure is to fit in because you don't feel strong enough to stand out, or you feel lonely, or that was part of me, or it's because you need to escape some pain that you're dealing with. One way or the other, addiction starts that way. Because I'm telling you, and I always used to wonder this, even after I stopped drinking. I used to go, how could someone get addicted to gambling? That's a weird thing. Because losing money is so painful to me. Like I bet on a football game one time, $20, and I was having a heart attack. Like I remember the exact game was when it was San Francisco was playing New York in 2011, and they made it to, or 2012, and they made it to the Super. It was like the NFC Championship game, the one the Giants, before then they went on to play the Patriots. And I remember that because it was like this back and forth showdown over $20. That's painful to me. So I don't even walk into gambling, but what they get is that anticipation of the payoff, the win, the payoff, though, the anticipation of the payoff.
The pleasure that the payoff.
That's what's enjoyable to them. That's what they get hooked on. For me, I got hooked on the feeling of feeling like people cared. Because I never, when I was growing up, I always I even to this day I struggle with this. The people that like me, they just like me. They want to just hang out and like me. I always felt like I had to bring something or no one would care. Like I won't even throw a party. One of my apprehensions, I mean, there are tons of apprehensions, but my personal apprehension about getting married is I'll throw it and nobody will, I'll send out the invitations and nobody will come, right? That's a real weird fear for somebody like me to have, but it's real in there. And I know that me drinking, that let me fit in. And I was like, okay, here's a group. Everybody's drinking. Let's go do this. And then I would take it to the next level and take it up. And I actually just gave a talk on this.
Was it peer pressure?
Wasn't even peer pressure.
You just wanted to be one of the cool
I
kids?
wanted to be, now it mixes in with a bunch of other parts of your personality. There's some competitiveness there. I wanted to be the guy that drank the most. I wanted to be
the most shots.
I wanted to be the most seen. I thought it would help me be more attractive. That's a weird one, right? When looking at it as a guy that doesn't drink now, and that's one. I'm like, okay, this all comes together. But it's a perfect storm that all comes back to trying to feel better about life. And drugs and alcohol it's if there was a happy pill, let's pretend I could give you something that's gonna make you happy. That's exactly what drugs do. The problem is that happiness comes at a steep cost if you get it that fast, if you get it without accomplishing anything. And that is usually the price that we end up paying.
And then eventually the happiness loses its value because if it's just so accessible.
Not only does it lose its value, it becomes harder to attain.
Yes.
You got to drink more and more to get the same level. I say, people ask me, well, what made you stop drinking eventually? Well, I started to care. And not only did I start to care, there's a funny thing. When you compare being liked to being respected, they feel the same. But it's a subtle difference. And it only feels the same. Well, I'll just say what I always say. I say, being liked feels like being respected to people who aren't used to experiencing either. And I never focused on being respected. I focused on being liked. But then in 2013, when I stopped drinking, there was a confluence of events that had happened in my life where I felt like I had a chance to be a respectable person. I had just finished, had just entered the military. I had just returned to school, had re-enrolled. I had just started my professional fighting career. And I was like, wow. And I had met the woman who's now my wife. And I was like, yo, there's all this stuff coming together. I really feel like I can become somebody that I'm proud to look at in the mirror. I started to care. I didn't want to just be liked. I wanted to have some substance. And that's what I started to chase. But as long as you're chasing approval and just approval for approval's sake, you'll attain it any way you can. And that's like a lesson for everything in life, not just how to stay away from addiction. If you do something, if you just want to be in a group because you're lonely, it doesn't really matter what the group is, you just don't want to be alone. There are a lot of groups where the cost of entry is low, and addicts, and not even addicts in general, because I don't think any of my friends are that way. But the analogy I gave when I was talking about this in my talk, I said, like imagine if you've never been an addict, imagine that you take your strongest junk food craving and you 10x it. And so now you're willing to do anything to get some more of that junk food. You're willing to, still take stupid risks, all of this. And all of your friends, they're not addicts, but they're regular consumers of this snack. And while they don't look down on you for using it, they certainly don't discourage your use either, if for any other reason than they do it too. I remember I was 23 or 24 when I first had the first inkling yo, this might be getting out of hand. And I made a mistake. I talked to one of my friends that I drank with, and I was like, yo, I think I got to go to AA. And what he said to me, he was like, yo, AA is forever, right? That was the response. Because, and I don't.
He didn't want to lose his drinking buddy.
Yeah, I don't blame him for it because he doesn't have a problem. So he's not looking at it through those eyes.
Lens, yeah.
And even if he, and let's pretend he was like, yo, man, you might be getting a little out of hand. he's gotta reconcile that, and I don't think most 20-year-olds or 20-something-year-olds will be capable of this. Most humans, let alone. He's got to be able to say to me, I know we've been drinking together and I'm doing it too, but you're doing it too much and I'm worried about you. That's a hard conversation for a lot of people to have from an emotional and an intellectual level, right? So I didn't realize that. I was just like, talking and thinking out loud. But ultimately what I did, when I did get sober, though, when I went to AA finally, I was like, yo, I sent all of my boys, it was five good friends I had. I said, look, man, I'm just letting you guys know I'm going to AA. I got a problem. I understand if you guys don't want to kick it anymore, but I got to do this for me. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen. And to my surprise, because we were talking about that fear, right? To my surprise, they were all like, yo, man, whatever you need, man, I'm with you. You do what you got to do. And then that was the thing. I was afraid of being alone. But eventually the pain, the fear of ending up in prison or ruining my life outweighed that fear of being alone. And that doesn't happen to everybody. I think I'm lucky that it happened to me.
What were what would happen? Because you said you start drinking and then you just couldn't stop. So
Yeah.
You were in it to win it. Would drink till you passed out, or
well,
would you get in your car and drive around?
Let me tell you what I would do. I hate small talk. But it's funny. I'm good at it now. I think I'm one of the best conversationalists you ever meet. I'm certainly the most interesting guy you ever meet. I really believe that, which is weird to think, and also think that people don't want to hang out with you. But when I would go out to places, like to bars, if bar hopping's your thing right now, you're listening, this is just my experience. That reflect the general thing, maybe. But when you really sit back and look at what happens in the bar, man, it is unbelievably dull. And I knew this. And I was bored, but I had to make myself, I had to pacify that part of my brain that was like, you should be doing all this stuff, but you're too afraid to be alone. You're too afraid to stand out. You're too afraid to be busy. I think that's why fighting was so good for me, because it was a thing. People went, oh, that's cool, you're fighting. And it took a lot of questions off if I didn't want to drink, because I think everybody that goes through the struggle, they're like, man, I don't want to do it, but I feel like people are going to look at me differently if I don't. So I got to drink, but fighting, man. People just go, oh, you're a fighter. You don't even want to drink. It's not a big deal. Eventually, that wasn't a big deal, but that's what addiction does. But for me, anytime I went out socializing, I was like, all right, what I got to do is I got to get blitzed as quickly as possible, because that's what I'm here for. I'm either here for that or girls, right? And I just figured if everybody was drinking, I need to be drinking more than everyone else so I can fit in and have a good time. Plus, I'm trying to silence
even more fit in.
Yeah, I got to silence that part of me that's like, go do something else. Go be in, or dumb yourself down and have a combo. I mean, I think about the time I wasted. I love football. We were talking earlier. There are only two sports I watch: boxing and football. And every now and then, if somebody is having a thing, I'll watch an MMA fight because I understand MMA and fighting. But I used to I used to look forward to it. I'd wake up and start drinking at the bar at 12 o'clock and be there till 8, 9 o'clock, man, just watching football all day, because it gave me an excuse to drink. Because there comes a point where you're not chasing it. You're not drinking for the sake of the reasons you started, right? That just carries you along until the switch happens, where now you don't know how to enjoy life without the booze. You can't do anything without it, at least not enjoyably. And I think it's like that with all drugs. It's just alcohol was my poison of choice, And there was a very clear moment when I knew I crossed over. I was in Los Angeles because I got recruited to this program called All American Heavyweights, and they were training top level fighters with the hopes of sending one to the Olympics, and they actually succeeded in that goal. I wasn't the fighter they sent to the Olympics, but they did in 2012 sending Dominic Brazil to the Olympics. But I was really lonely out there, man. I didn't know anybody. And my license was suspended, not for anything related to drinking, thank goodness, but it was suspended. And, trying to have a social life in a city like Los Angeles, that's an exercise in futility. So I had this crazy idea one day. I was like, yo, what if I start drinking and it's going to recreate the same good feelings I had drinking with everybody else back home? And I was like, yeah, that's rough. And then from there, you just keep it going, man. I mean, I wasn't like, I'm sure that wasn't like the first time I drank to alter my mood or anything like that. But it was the first time I was consciously aware of it, where I was like, this is the goal. We feel like this, we're gonna get like this. I'm gonna drink by myself. And on a side note, so you guys probably don't know about this living in Florida. So there's 2 states in the United States where the government still controls the distribution of liquor. Pennsylvania is one of them. So we had to go to Wines and Spirits, which is like who's got the government contract to sell. They've expanded a little bit, but certainly back then, if you wanted hard liquor, you went to Wines and Spirits. As my mom used to call it, the state store, which I think is still called to some degree. When I moved to California, I was like, yo, I can go to Target and get a bottle. I can get a 5th at Target. What? And it was great. And it was a Target right across the street, man. So there was no like distance thing. Everywhere that you could get booze, get a 40 at the gas station. I blew my mind. But yeah, those things all led to the drinking, and that's kind of how I did it, man. I was just trying to feel better about myself instead of dealing with my issues.
And that's why I think alcohol is so prevalent. Sorry, but
No,
I
you're
think
good.
alcohol is so prevalent and hard to do because it's so common. It's everywhere you turn. And it's like you sit at a restaurant, you're just there for food. They're like, "Oh, would you like this to drink?"
Somebody said it best. It was like, "Yo, I think we got it wrong when we made weed illegal and alcohol legal. We should have reversed it." Because I've been around. I don't smoke, right? And I have my opinions about smoking, but one opinion I don't have about it, smoking weed, is that it's going to lead to somebody else dying. You don't hear about people overdosing on weed. Yeah. You don't hear about people. You shouldn't drive buzz at all either. But like people ain't fighting on weed. Yeah, exactly. Like it's just it just works differently, and that's the one we made.
Yeah, you're not getting blackout drunk on weed.
Yeah,
like you don't know what happened.
It's at least not just weed. We made a mistake with that one, but yeah, it's so prevalent. And it's so ingrained in our culture. I wrote an essay about this, about the amount of alcohol on the college campus and how this ties into it. No one wants to talk about this because this is the society we live in. But when I wrote my book, Sober Letters to My Drunken Self, it was right around when Brock Turner, the guy out at Stanford, was on national trial for the sexual assault, and the judge gave him effectively a slap on the wrist. Well, not effectively, it was a slap on the wrist for the charges that he was facing, to the point where like the public got angry and they eventually, like, I guess you can vote out a judge, and that's what occurred. But one of the interesting things that happened as a result of all this is that Stanford instituted a policy where you couldn't have more than, I think, like 750 milliliters of alcohol or something like that at a place, because of all of this stuff. They talked about the effect of alcohol on women's bodies and how it makes it much more likely that assaults will happen. And then all these girls freaked out, like, this is sexist. Just tell guys, blaming doing this is, blaming the alcohol instead of the guys. And I'm like, you are not understanding how powerful this stuff is and what it does to your brain. First of all, the idea that alcohol affects men and women the same is crazy. Anybody that's ever been out drinking with a mixed sex group knows women get drunker a lot faster. They're just smaller, right? It's a big deal. And then on top of that, when you drink, guys misinterpret cues and women misinterpret the body language they send out. Like if you I crunched this math on my own because no one had really done it. If you look at the sexual assaults where alcohol is involved on the age group between 18 and 24, and you remove alcohol from it, you would eliminate, in theory, right? If you would eliminate about 80% of them, 70%, well, like 70 to 80%. When you look at like ones where both or one person is drinking. Something also is interesting. You know what almost never happens? Where just the perpetrator is drinking and the victim isn't. And I thought that was so crazy that almost never happens, where there's only where the person who does the damage is the one intoxicated and the other person's sober. But it's usually co-drinking, or just the person is under the influence and the other person is like, okay, let's.
And then she later regrets what happened.
Yeah, and it's
remembers things.
Yeah, and even if like and I said in the essay, I said, you know, let's pretend, because I worked out the math on the numbers that were like false reports or non-reports to give a range, you know, of where it was most likely a thing that actually happened. And you would still do so much, but that is a hard conversation that nobody wants to have because we've made alcohol such a part of our society that to even suggest that it plays a role in crimes, even though we don't do this, like the analogy I gave was like, most people don't harbor murderous intentions, but when they drink and drive and get behind the wheel, they are now killers. Like they facing manslaughter charge if the alcohol under the influence leads to them committing that crime.
Yeah, that's what happened to my friend.
Like
he was sitting in jail.
Like I'm sure your friend was not like, you know, we're gonna do court, we can go out and kill some people today. Like, nah, that's not how he thinks. But alcohol altered his brain chemistry and made that possible.
It was weird because he's a good-looking dude. All the hot girls liked him. He was popular, but man, he was Jekyll and Hyde. He was a completely different person when he was drinking. To the point where we stopped hanging out with him when we were like 19, 20, and we would just see him or hear from him occasionally.
Because that's what I mean when I say that, is that if the law of large, you can only outrun the law of large numbers for so long, is what I say. And the law of large numbers for people who don't know is the idea in mathematics that if you repeat a trial enough, the outcome should reflect the theoretical prediction. And the example I use is if we flip a coin 10 times and it comes up 7 heads, 3 tails, you shouldn't think the coin is like your intuition showed that even though it's 50-50 chance that coin's not fixed, it just happened to land 7 and 3, right? 70% tails, 30% heads. If we flip it 50 times and it comes up like 24 heads and 26 tails, well, now a little closer, but still not 50-50. If we flip it 1,000 times, maybe it comes up 500, but it's probably going to come up like 490, 510, which is still going to be, even though that's a bigger numerical gap, or absolute gap, it's still going to be percentage-wise a lot closer to 50-50 than it was with 10 flips or 100. The point is that you can only do this for so long before what's supposed to happen does happen, which is something bad in the case of booze. Like you can only drive drunk so many times before you get pulled over and it's a problem. Or even worse, you end up, killing somebody. You ever see the movie Shot Caller, which is just like kind of random? But
I don't think I saw that.
Shot Caller, first of all, great film. But the plot is that this guy who's like this white collar, I think he's like a lawyer maybe, or a stock dude. He's something real white collar. He, his wife, and his 2 friends, and a couple that they're friends with, they go out for dinner. They have a few drinks, and they're driving. And he rear ends a guy or hits a guy, ends up killing him. Gets 2 years in jail because he's connected and he's got money and everything. And it's his first offense. But then while he's in jail to survive, he joins a white gang and I think ends up beating somebody to death or something like that, and then gets like a 7-year sentence out of like a 2 years where he only would have served like probably not even 80% with good behavior. So just a random note, man, what can happen? You end up going to jail and then you got to join a prison gang to survive.